Hi everyone, it's Dee from Know Better Do Better, and today I'm going to talk about Encopresis definition of Encopresis, but also when we're talking about soiling, there's in my books 3 different types of soiling to look out for, and each of them will mean different things for where your child is at in their enco journey or fecal impaction journey or constipation journey, depending on what information you've received from your doctor and where you feel that you're at. So to start with, encopresis by definition is fecal soiling in a child of toilet trained age. You can Google it and find longer definitions. Some will involve behavioural aspects, some will involve physical aspects. Everything I've seen, it's encopresis involves both, but it's really a chicken and an egg scenario where sometimes the physical will drive the psychological, other times the psychological will drive the physical. So a lot of this does come down to you as a parent or a carer to have a look at your child's behaviours and why you think it might, or what you think happened to get to the point you're at. And it's one of the things, I guess, that doctors really just can't do. And this is one of the reasons behind the series of videos, is the more information that I can share with you that I've learned and read over the years, the more you're able to work out your own child and what's going to work for you, because there is no one band-aid. The treatment doctors give you, which is generally large dose softeners, like clean out protocol, large dose softeners, and then 3 sits on the toilet a day. And if you're lucky, they might add in sneaky poo from a psychologist. Only works in 40 to 60% of children. So if you've done that and tried it and it hasn't worked for you, don't keep banging your head against the wall, look further. And that's, one of the reasons I've done this series of videos, is to help, for you to look at all your options and feel comfortable with them. Now, before I get too far off that subject, back to encopresis and its definition. So by definition, fecal soiling in a child of toilet trained age. To me, there's 3 different types of soiling to look for. I call them oozy goozy poosy soiling, touching cloth soiling, and also the big whole kit and caboodle soiling. So to break this down with what you might see if you are changing your child's underwear regularly is touching cloth is really as it sounds. There's a poo trying to come out. The child is desperately perhaps not wanting to let it out, and the end of it really is just rubbing on the underwear, and it'll create sort of a bit of a circle mess. It'll be quite dry often. But yeah, that's because it's a normal-ish poo or a hardish type of poo pushing out onto the underwear. Your oozy-goozy poos are way different. This is often the overflow poo, or it could be as a result of too many softeners or too much softeners being taken, and therefore regular poo is becoming too runny. But if it is an oozy-goozy overflow poo, it will tend to be, I think, shiny and mucusy looking. It will really, really smell more than normal poo. I think for me personally, it's quite light in colour, and it's because there's a reason for that. There's a physical reason for that. I'll go into it now. Okay, so the physical reason for it being quite light in colour and very smelly is overflow poo is when the entire colon is generally full of impacted solid fecal matter. You get overflow when the liquidy poo, if you watch my last video on how the body works, the liquid waste that comes from the small intestine into the colon, it's being moved around the colon, but the problem is there's so much poo stuck in there that there's not enough surface area of the colon to draw out enough moisture. So then by the time it actually gets to the rectum, it's still runny, and that is oozing out into your child's underwear. They generally will not feel it. They even do not smell it or know they've done it. That's a whole other video. So if you've been thinking like I did, that your child is doing this deliberately or sitting in their own poo for hours on end, it's not the case. It is one of the reasons I called my I guess business or this Know Better Do Better, because I did all of the wrong things. I thought my son was just being lazy. He would get in trouble if he had skitties, you know, go to your room, taking off technology, all sorts of different things. And it wasn't until I knew better that I understood that that this was way beyond his control. And that's a whole other video on the psychological and the physical manifestation of this. It's not a simple condition. It is super complex, both in physical and in mental. So, you know, there's going to be perhaps a bit of guilt. You might feel like I did extremely badly. Once I learnt a lot more, I realized it wasn't his fault. I did feel really awful about all of the times that you know, I got upset with him. So if that's you, forgive yourself, because until you know better, you know, you can't do better. You do the best with what you know, and there's not a lot of info on this condition. So that's, I guess, oozy goozy poozies. They're the real foul smelling, liquidy ones. And that will generally mean, I mean, not in all cases, obviously everything's different, but that real liquidy poo, if you're not on a high dose softener, will generally mean that you've got an impacted colon. The whole kit and caboodle, that's pretty much it. That's a child who is, I would say, generally at the beginning of the like stool withholding, they will have a poo coming. They will still, you know, luckily be able to feel it coming. They'll get that urge and they will hold on. They will clench their butt cheeks. They will stand knock-kneed. Mind you, some of them don't. My son never showed any sign of withholding, but I do know he did. The reason I know he did, and I'll tell you this story now, was my son has a wonderful habit of squatting on the toilet. It's actually the best way to poo, but he decided that's how he wanted to do it. So when we were watching him, you know, the time sits 3 times a day and getting him to sit, gross, but we had, you know, a good view of what was going on, or I did. And I'd say to him, you know, push, buddy, push. And you would see his stomach muscles straining. He wanted to make me happy. He was pushing with all his might. But when you looked, you could firmly see that his sphincter muscle was clamped tight shut. Now that's become a reflex behavior. Whenever he started to hold his poo in or decide he didn't want to let it out was a long time ago. By the time we got to this point, it was a reflex. And no matter how hard he pushed to make me happy, to you know, to stay with the program or try and, you know, achieve something, I was bribing him with toys and all sorts of things. Like, you know, he was trying really hard to get that poo out, and you could just see that the muscle was just clamped shut. And it's one of the problems. It's one of the reasons this is so hard to fix, is because we don't, or haven't not like identified through general medical channels that this happens. So he could not relax it enough to let the poo out. And so to take me back, we never once saw him battling to suppress a poo. I do know there are plenty of kids who do. I've read plenty of stories of kids battling to hold that poo in, and the whole kit and caboodle is when they lose that battle and it all ends up in their underwear instead of the toilet. You've also got your kids who will, you know, hold, really young ones who will hold until they get a nappy or a pull up on. You could call that the whole kit and caboodle as well, because they won't let it out until you know, the very last moment. So they're your 3 types of soiling. They are indicative, I feel, of where your child is at. So if we're at whole kit and caboodle, the urge hasn't disappeared yet, I don't feel. Also that their reflex to hold hasn't become ingrained. So you are still in a good position to get onto this really early and start to help get that poo out. Why they hold it in could be a myriad of reasons. We will cover off on that. But to name some, ASD and ADHD kids are 6 times more likely. ADHD, my son is ADHD, and I believe his reasoning was, I'm too busy, so I'm not going to go, I'm playing. So he would hold it in, it would stay in there an extra day, it would get hard, it created a plug and a self-fulfilling prophecy. But that was probably 2 years before we even knew he did it. ASD kids, it can be a sensory issue. They don't like the feeling of it coming out, so it kind of freaks them out and they'll hold it in. I would love some insight from some ASD and co-parents as to why they think their child does, because not having one, I haven't been able to correlate a lot of information as to why they do it. But certainly high anxiety. Some kids, they start this because they go to daycare and they've got the open toilets, and this drives me nuts. All these little toilets sitting beside each other. Who wants to poo beside someone else? So there are kids who just will refuse. They won't go while they're at daycare. They'll rush in the door, they'll go and they'll sit on the toilet. But what happens is that's just reinforcing their behavior. They're almost like one hardened poo away from a hardened plug, which will then become slow transit constipation and then creates the knock-on effect that we're at. So high anxiety children, a lot of children who have Enco, I believe, are extremely intelligent kids. These are ones who, whilst it doesn't make sense to us that they wouldn't want to poo, it is their heightened intelligence, in my opinion, mostly, that will get a lot of them to hold. And once again, it creates its own problems in trying to solve this for them. Who else? Look, just from fear. Some people say, oh, my child's been constipated since birth. Well, if they've been constipated since birth and poos have hurt since birth, they are going to have a huge fear of it. I can give you an insight into developing, childhood phobias, because for my entire life, as far as I can remember, I have had emetophobia, which is a phobia of vomiting. And I've always been that way, and I believe it went back to extremely painful reflux as a baby from what mum tells me. So I can't see why extremely painful poos wouldn't create the same fear in a small child, and you're not going to do what you fear. So part of the program Soiling Solutions, which is what we used, addresses all of that. It's face the fear and the fear will disappear, quote by Dr. Robert Collins, an amazing man. It's exposure therapy, and it is, as you start to get the poo out and the poo stays soft, they start to realize that it's no longer hurting, and that fear will generally, slowly, possibly subside. Takes a long time to unlearn a lot of these things. So certainly there's an example of the physical driving the psychological. So one bout of constipation could even do it. You have one hard poo and a child who is only young and doesn't understand the consequences of the decision, goes, that's it, I'm not pooing ever again, that hurt. It stays in longer, the poo gets harder, it's self-fulfilling. It reinforces that idea that they were right. If your child is only just there, by all means use something, I like pear and prune juice, but that's not going to work if you've got an Enco kid or a severely constipated child. It won't touch it. But if you're listening to this because you found it because one bout of constipation happened, certainly things like that. But take it seriously. Get that poo out. Get it moving, so they don't go down this path. What else can I say on all this? I've got so much, but it branches off into lots of different categories. But essentially that's Encopresis. That's my take on it, obviously, my overview. You can have a look at, start to think of what behaviours it might be in your child. It could be that, yes, your child had a dairy intolerance, which caused a bout of constipation, which may have caused this knock-on effect. Taking dairy out now, whilst in the long run will help, it may be too far gone to just take dairy out and hope it's going to resolve itself, because if they are blocked, go back to the video about the slow moving train. You've got to move that train out and give them a clean, fresh start. So I think, flat poos. I think I mentioned flat poos. So if you're seeing flat poos in your child, so kind of like, a squashed finger type of shape, that means you have got an impaction down low and you've got a poo being squashed down between the colon wall and that poo, and it's flattening it out. And if it's low down, it means it hasn't really got time to reform into a nice, tube. So something to look for. That's a little trigger. But anyway, so that's Encopresis in as much of a nutshell as I can put it in there for you. I touched on it, soiling solutions. Like I said, I don't make any money from promoting this, but it is just the most amazing amount of information that you would ever get and support you would ever get. So you can find it at encopresis.com. Go check it out, read the forum, read the parents who said, I wish I'd found this earlier. I'm going to do more videos on what the physical aspects of undertaking the program is, and talking about what makes each step of that program extremely important, so that that you understand that it's not a scary thing. It's not beyond you. It's absolutely not beyond you. And I break down those components to make it really quite comfortable and give you an understanding of why. So anyway, I'm Dee, know better, do better, and hopefully this has helped you today, and I'll be bringing you another video soon. Have a good day. Bye.